The lawyer read the number twice, like he didn't believe it either. $1, he said, to Maren Cole. $1, and nothing else. My stepbrother Trent didn't even try to hide it. He laughed that same laugh he'd used on me since I was 12 years old, standing in my dead father's office like he already owned the walls. $1, he repeated, wiping his eyes. Guess Dad finally saw you clearly. I didn't say anything. I just watched the lawyer's hand move to the next page. What Trent didn't know was that my father hadn't written that will for Trent. He'd written it for this exact moment, the moment Trent laughed before he read, before I tell you what was on that page. Comment below where you're watching from, and subscribe if you believe some inheritances aren't about money they're about who's been paying attention the whole time. My name is Maren Cole. I'm 34, a structural engineer, and for 11 years I worked quietly for the company my father built from a single pickup truck, and a business loan he almost didn't get approved for. Walter Cole never called it my company in front of Trent. He called it ours. But everyone in that office knew exactly whose name was on the permits, whose signature made the payroll clear, and whose late nights kept 40 employees fed. It was mine, in every way that mattered, except the one that would end up mattering most, the paperwork. Trent was my father's stepson, from his second marriage to Denise. Trent had never worked a single day at Cole Construction. He'd shown up exactly 3 times in 11 years, once for the Christmas party, once to ask for a loan, and once to tell my father, in front of the whole office, that I was just the help who happened to share his last name. My father said nothing that day. I remember thinking that silence was a kind of surrender. Denise adored Trent the way people adore things they've decided to believe in, no matter the evidence. And my father, quiet, tired, 61 years old, with a heart that had already scared us twice, let it happen. He let Trent take the office down the hall. He let Denise plan the company Christmas party like she ran the place. And every single time, I told myself, he sees it. He has to see it. Then, 14 months ago, my father was diagnosed. Stage 4. He didn't tell me right away, he told Trent first, because Trent liked to remind people that he was next of kin. Technically, I found out from a nurse who assumed I already knew. I drove 2 hours to the hospital that night. Trent was in the waiting room on his phone, laughing at something. Actually laughing, in a cancer ward, while our father lay behind a door neither of us could open yet. He's asking for you, the nurse told me. Not Trent. Me, I sat with my father for 6 hours that night. He held my hand and said one thing I didn't understand until 3 weeks ago. Maren, whatever you hear in that lawyer's office, trust me. Trust the paper, not the moment. I didn't ask what he meant. I should have. He passed 8 months later, on a Tuesday, with Denise already on the phone with a realtor about the house situation. I remember standing in the hallway of the hospital and hearing her say the words, once everything settled like my father's body was still warm, and she was already measuring curtains. The will reading was scheduled for Thursday. Trent showed up in a suit that cost more than my father's last truck payment. Denise brought her own lawyer, just to review things. I brought nothing but the same quiet I'd carried for 11 years. The attorney, a soft-spoken man named Harold Ames, who'd handled my father's affairs since before I was born, opened a folder thicker than I expected. He read the first section, the house, transferred to Denise. The vehicles, split between Trent and Denise. A modest trust for a cousin in Ohio. And then my name. To my daughter, Maren Cole, I leave the sum of $1. Trent didn't wait a full second. $1, he said, already grinning at his mother. Guess Dad finally figured out who actually did something around here. Denise didn't even bother hiding her smile. I sat still. Not because I was calm, because something in my chest had gone very, very cold, and cold things don't move. Harold Ames didn't laugh. He didn't even look up right away. He just turned the page, slow, like he'd been waiting 11 months to do exactly that. There's an addendum, he said. Attached the same week your father was diagnosed. He asked me to read it exactly as written, and not one word before. Trent's smile was still there. It just hadn't caught up yet. Harold cleared his throat and began reading aloud, and the first sentence alone made Denise's lawyer sit up straight in his chair. This story is a fictional tale created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. I, Walter Cole, being of sound mind, direct that the $1 bequeathed to my daughter Maren Cole represents the value of the shares she currently believes she does not own. Trent's smile finally caught up to what was happening. It froze. Harold kept reading. Steady, like he'd rehearsed this exact pace in front of a mirror. 11 years ago, I transferred 49% ownership of Cole Construction to my daughter, structured as a private holding under Cole Family Trust II, to protect it from claims by anyone who might one day attempt to dissolve or dilute the company without her consent. This transfer was never made public knowledge, at her request, to avoid conflict within the family. At her request. That part wasn't a lie. Exactly, but it wasn't the whole truth either. I'd asked my father to keep it quiet, yes, but not to protect myself. I'd asked because I didn't want Trent's resentment poisoning every family dinner for a decade. I wanted peace more than I wanted credit. My father had honored that request for 11 years, right up until the moment peace stopped being useful to me. Denise's lawyer was already flipping through his own copy, looking for the paperwork he clearly hadn't been shown before agreeing to review things. Harold continued, the remaining 51%, along with full operational control, is transferred upon my death to the same trust, effective immediately. Maren Cole is named sole controlling trustee. Trent stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. That can't be legal. He would have told me. He would have told my mother. He did tell someone, Harold said quietly. He told me, in writing notarized 11 years ago and reaffirmed 4 months before he passed, in a video statement he asked me to keep sealed until this exact reading. That was the part I hadn't known was coming. Harold reached into his bag and set a small tablet on the table, screen dark, waiting. He asked that I play this only if his instructions were questioned, Harold said, looking directly at Trent. I believe we've reached that point. The video was 31 seconds long. My father, thinner than I remembered, sitting in his study, looking straight into the camera like he was looking straight at his stepson. Trent, if you're hearing this, it means you laughed before you read the second page. I knew you would. I've watched you dismiss Maren for 11 years, and I let it happen because I was tired, and because keeping the peace felt easier than telling the truth. That ends today. The company was never in question. What was in question was whether you'd finally see who built it. Now you know. And now, it's hers, completely, and always was. The room went silent, in a way I'd never experienced before. Not tense silence, not grieving silence, defeated silence. Denise's face had gone the color of the folder in front of her. This isn't we need our own valuation. We'll contest this. You're welcome to try, Harold said, sliding a second document across the table. Though I'd point out that Section 12 names the specific conditions under which the trust can be challenged, and frivolous contests trigger forfeiture of the remaining vehicle and cousins' trust distributions. Per your husband's I'm sorry Walter's explicit instruction. Trent looked at his mother. His mother looked at the folder. Neither of them looked at me. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply stood, thanked Harold, and told them both that payroll for the 42 employees still working under Cole Construction would continue uninterrupted, effective that afternoon, under my signature. 3 weeks later, Trent tried to access the company email system with his old login. It had been deactivated the same day as the reading. He called twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. Some conversations don't need a response, they need silence. The same silence he once used against me, now finally in the right hands. Denise sold the house 6 months later. Last I heard, she and Trent had moved 2 states away, somewhere quieter, somewhere no one asked what happened to the family business. I still run Cole Construction. I kept my father's name on the sign. Because it was never about erasing him, it was about finally being seen by everyone else, the way he'd always seen me. For the first time in 11 years, no one in that office laughed at the wrong moment.